The United States Air Force is superior because it's 12 times bigger and has a budget of $180 billion. The Royal Air Force is just a small, outdated force living off World War II glory days. American pilots are better trained because they have more advanced technology. All of these statements are complete rubbish, and I'm about to prove it with data that will destroy everything you think and know about air power. Because here's the secret the Pentagon doesn't want you to discover. Despite spending 12 times more money, the US Air Force has a dirty little problem that's about to explode. Meanwhile, the RAF, with just 670 aircraft, has been pulling off combat missions that should be impossible. But there's something even more shocking coming in this video. Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal will change how you see military air power forever. But first, type blue for the RAF or red for the US Air Force. Welcome back to the war. First, let me hit you with the numbers that will make your head spin. The United States Air Force has over 333,000 active personnel, over 5,000 aircraft, and a mind-numbing $180 billion budget for 2025. The Royal Air Force has just 34,801 personnel, and that includes reserves. 670 aircraft, and a fraction of that budget. But here's where it gets weird, and this is the first clue that everything you've been told is wrong. Actually, before I tell you that shocking stat, let me ask you something. What if I told you that despite this massive spending difference, one of these air forces can't even keep half their jets in the air? The RAF operates 49% of their fleet as training aircraft, nearly half. They're betting everything on producing the world's most elite pilots, but the Americans, they're hemorrhaging pilots faster than a sinking ship, and the reason why will make you furious. But here's the number that will blow your mind, and it's coming from coalition data that's just been declassified. In recent Middle East operations, the RAF carried out over 1,700 airstrikes. The Americans, over 20,000. But when you calculate the real effectiveness per dollar spent, one air force is embarrassing the other so badly it's not even close. I'll reveal which one in just a few minutes, but first you need to understand the training disaster that's destroying one of these forces from within. In 2023, Air Chief Marshal Sir Richard Knighton was forced to make a public apology that sent shockwaves through the British military world. The RAF had been caught red-handed discriminating against qualified white male pilots to hit diversity targets. 161 minority pilots were fast-tracked. Qualified candidates rejected based on skin colour. Training times exploded from 2 to 3 years to 6 to 7 years. The RAF literally broke their own training system chasing political correctness. But here's what's really insane. They're still defending these policies while begging for more pilots. Meanwhile, the US Air Force is facing their own pilot crisis, but for a completely different reason that reveals something terrifying about American military culture. And when I show you the retention numbers, you'll understand why one of these air forces might collapse within the next decade. But first, let me ask you this. Would you want to serve in an air force that judges you for your skin colour, or one that burns through pilots so fast they can't maintain their aircraft? Keep that question in mind, because the answer gets complicated. The training philosophies couldn't be more different. RAF pilots train in weather that would ground Americans. They're weather warriors who specialise in low altitude operations below 1,000 feet. It's brutal, but it creates pilots who can adapt to anything. The US Air Force? High volume, standardised training. Critics call it a pilot factory, but it's designed to produce large numbers quickly. The question is, does this sacrifice excellence for quantity? And here's something that will shock you. There's actual combat data that proves which training method produces deadlier pilots. But to understand it, you first need to know about the most expensive Air Force disaster in human history. The F-35 Lightning II, the most expensive military program in human history, and both air forces made catastrophically wrong decisions that are still haunting them. Here's where it gets absolutely infuriating. The UK chose the F-35B at $109 million per aircraft. The Americans focused on the F-35A at just $82.5 million. That's a 25% price difference. But wait, it gets worse. The F-35A can't even refuel from British tankers. The Voyager aircraft aren't compatible, meaning RAF 35As have to rely on American tankers for extended operations. How is this not the biggest procurement scandal in history? But actually, let me pause here, because this next part is so ridiculous you might not believe it. In 2025, the UK quietly announced they're buying F-35A aircraft for nuclear missions, essentially admitting the F-35B was the wrong choice all along. They're now operating two different variants of the same aircraft. The serviceability rates tell the real story. The F-35B availability sits below 60%. Nearly half the fleet is grounded at any given time. The US Air Force's F-35As are much better, but at least they didn't pay extra for capabilities they can't use. Remember, I promised to show you which Air Force delivers better value. Here's the shocking truth. The RAF's F-35Bs, despite all these problems, have been achieving mission success rates that are making Pentagon analysts nervous. But the real combat effectiveness data, the numbers that prove which Air Force is actually deadlier, that's coming next. Remember those airstrike numbers I mentioned. Here's the data that just got declassified, and it will destroy everything you think you know about air power effectiveness. During Operation Inherent Resolve in Iraq and Syria, the coalition made over 30,000 airstrikes. The US Air Force carried out over 20,000, and the RAF around 2,000 airstrikes. But here's the number that will blow your mind. Casualties per strike. The RAF's 2,000 strikes resulted in 4,315 enemy casualties with minimal civilian casualties. The US Air Force's 20,000 strikes, they reported 1,257 plus civilian casualties, a significantly higher rate. Now this could be explained by scale, but it raises an uncomfortable question. Does the American overwhelming firepower approach create more collateral damage than British precision? And here's something that will make you angry. Which approach do you think the media celebrates? The precise, surgical strikes that minimise civilian casualties, or the massive bombardment campaigns that make better headlines? But there's something even more revealing in this data. When you analyse the pilot to kill ratios and factor in training costs, one Air Force is producing deadlier pilots at a fraction of the cost. The numbers are so shocking that military analysts are questioning everything they thought they knew about air power. But next, you need to understand the ground warriors. The RAF regiment has 1,850 regular personnel. They're battle tested since World War II, parachute qualified, and can integrate with special forces. These are infantry who secure airfields and protect aircraft. The US Air Force Security Forces has 39,000 personnel, nearly 20 times larger. They handle law enforcement and combat roles, specialise in nuclear security and provide global base protection. But here's what I want you to think about. In a real war, would you rather have 1,850 warriors who can do everything, or 38,000 specialists who need massive logistical support? The RAF regiment's smaller size forces them to be more adaptable. Every member has to be capable of multiple roles because there's no backup. The US Air Force Security Forces can afford specialisation, but this might create vulnerabilities. And speaking of vulnerabilities, wait until you see the budget numbers, because when you realise how much money is being wasted, you'll understand why one of these air forces might be living on borrowed time. The United States Air Force budget for 2025 was $180 billion. The UK's entire defence budget is $71.5 billion. We're talking about spending disparity that should make any comparison meaningless. But here's what should embarrass Pentagon planners. The RAF's achievements on a fraction of the budget, advanced F-35B operations, NATO leadership, and the favourable coalition strike numbers we talked about, all while operating on scraps compared to American spending. This raises an uncomfortable question for American taxpayers. Where is all that money actually going? Think about this. If a force 12 times smaller can carry out a combat load with surgical precision, what does that say about efficiency? Are Americans getting value for their tax dollars? Or is this the biggest waste in military history? Remember, I promised to show you the pilot-to-kill ratios. Here's the data that makes military analysts question everything. When you factor in training costs and combat effectiveness, RAF pilots are producing results at a third the cost per enemy casualty. But there's a crisis coming that threatens to destroy both air forces, and the cause will shock you. Now, let's talk history. Everyone knows about the RAF's finest hour, the Battle of Britain in 1940. 544 RAF pilots died defending Britain against 2,500 Luftwaffe aircraft. It saved Western civilization. But here's what they don't teach you in school. The US Air Force had their own finest hour that was just as crucial, and it reveals everything about American air power philosophy. The Berlin Airlift, 1948 to 1949. The Soviets blockaded West Berlin, trying to starve 2.5 million people into submission. The US Air Force's response was the most audacious airlift in human history. 189,000 flights, 1.7 million tons of supplies, aircraft landing every 45 seconds at peak operations for 15 months straight. But here's the part that will blow your mind. The Battle of Britain was about precision, skill, and individual heroism. 544 pilots against impossible odds, using superior training and tactics to defeat a numerically superior enemy. The Berlin airlift was about scale, logistics, and overwhelming capability. 31 American airmen died, but they moved an entire city's worth of supplies through the air for over a year. 2 different philosophies, 2 different approaches to air power. The RAF said, "We'll outfight you with better pilots." The US Air Force said, "We'll overwhelm you with superior logistics." But which philosophy wins in modern warfare? The answer is in the pilot shortage crisis affecting both forces. Here's the crisis that threatens both air forces. They're running out of pilots, but for completely different reasons that reveal everything wrong with modern military thinking. The RAF's crisis is self-inflicted. 6 to 7 year training pipelines instead of 2 to 3 years. Desperate appeals to previously rejected candidates. A system that prioritised skin colour over skill and is now paying the price. The US Air Force's crisis is structural. They're losing nearly 2,000 pilots annually. Active duty retention is at 45%, but guard and reserve retention is at 89%. What does this tell you? Pilots are fleeing active duty as fast as they can, but staying in the guard and reserves. But why? Because the United States Air Force's bigger is better approach creates a bureaucratic nightmare that burns out pilots faster than it can train them. Mission capable rates below 58% for fighters. Nearly half the fleet is grounded, not because of maintenance, but because there aren't enough qualified pilots. The RAF discriminates based on race and destroys their training pipeline. The US Air Force creates a system so toxic that pilots flee to civilian airlines. Both are failing, but for reasons that reveal the deeper problems with Western military thinking. But there's one more shocking truth that will change how you see this entire comparison. After analysing everything, from training disasters, combat effectiveness, budget realities, historical comparisons, here's the verdict that will shock you. Neither Air Force is prepared for the future of warfare. The RAF's precision approach works, but their ideological capture is destroying their ability to train pilots. The US Air Force's scale advantage is real, but their bureaucratic monster consumes resources without delivering proportional results. But here's what's really terrifying. China and Russia are watching these failures with great interest. While we debate diversity quotas and budget allocations, they're building air forces focused on one thing: winning wars. The real winner in this comparison isn't the RAF or US Air Force, it's our enemies, who are watching Western air forces tear themselves apart from within. But there's still hope. It lies in combining the RAF's precision and adaptability with the United States Air Force's scale and technology. The question is whether political leadership has the courage to abandon failed ideologies and focus on what matters: defending freedom. So here's my question, and I want this debate to explode in the comments. Would you rather serve in the RAF with their precision training, or the United States Air Force with their technological superiority? Has political correctness destroyed the RAF's effectiveness? Is the United States Air Force's massive budget creating waste and bureaucracy? Which Air Force would you choose to defend your country? The debate starts now. Hi soldiers, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and leave your thoughts in the comments. And check out our merch and membership programs. And don't forget to check back in again soon. That's an order.